Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Well, hello, it's Wednesday, and that means it's time for another episode of Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly, I'm your host, I'm also your new wedding planning bestie, and today we're talking all about pandemic wedding trends that I still love. If you had told me 3 years ago that I'd be finding inspiration in the pandemic, I would have laughed at you. But because of COVID, because of lockdown, and because of the way that everything changed, weddings were required to change as well. And because of that, some trends crept their way into COVID weddings and pandemic wedding trends appeared, and some of them are actually kind of amazing. But before we get into those, I first want to address the fact that COVID was a very difficult time for many people. In particular, with the wedding industry, couples were hit very hard, having to reschedule things, having to postpone their wedding, cancel plans. There were many guests that couldn't attend because travel wasn't permitted for a long time. We had many iterations of guidelines and, roadmaps and, different elements of the wedding being okay and then some not being okay. And it was a very confusing time for lots of people. And then suppliers, many of them, were out of work because if you can't host weddings and that's your job, what do you do? And so it was a very difficult time. Suppliers were having to pivot their services so that everything could be COVID safe. And some suppliers were getting very creative, being able to help couples celebrate their wedding date that they'd originally set, even if the actual wedding celebration was postponed. So you had florists creating a beautiful bouquet that they could give to the couple just on their original wedding date to celebrate that moment. You had cake makers who normally design huge cakes for hundreds of guests, making a small wedding cake just for the couple to enjoy. So things looked very different. A lot of people were required to change their expectations, and it was a very hard time. So I don't want to make light of the fact that it was difficult, but every cloud does have a silver lining. And when it comes to weddings, the pandemic certainly introduced a few things that I think should stick around. So I'm going to walk you through my favorites, and I'm very interested to know if anything that I love about the pandemic wedding trends is something that you are incorporating into your very own wedding as well. So if that's the case, I would love to hear from you. Let me know. You can follow us on Weddings Online on Instagram. Comment on any of our posts, send us a direct message. I would love to hear from you, and I want to hear what your wedding is like and how it's shifted because of the pandemic, but in a good way. First one, shopping local. I'm a huge fan of shopping local, and during the pandemic, there was a period of time where you could only shop local. So if you wanted to have flowers at your wedding, you had to have flowers done by your local florist. You had to have a wedding venue that was close because travel, even more than a certain amount of kilometers or miles, it was not permitted. And so people were kind of forced to shop local. But I think it's kind of amazing because you get to support local businesses. You get to collaborate with people who live in your area. There's something ethical, there's something sustainable about shopping local. If you consider the fact that, if we use flowers as an example, if you are shopping local, you're not expecting a huge truck or airplane to transport all the flowers that you want to your wedding location because everything is local. And that's just better for the planet. It's better for the local businesses. It's actually a great initiative. And so even if you aren't getting married after postponing your wedding a number of times, and if you don't have to shop local, I would encourage you to do it anyway because it's a really amazing thing to do, and your local suppliers will be very, very happy with you. Second thing is weekday weddings. Now, if you consider the fact that we had a lot of postponed weddings a few years ago, we then had a year where we had wedding dates that were scheduled, then we had rescheduled wedding dates creeping in. And so we basically had a year of a lot more weddings than normal. And because of that, all the popular wedding dates were kind of taken very quickly. So I'm talking your Fridays, Saturdays, even your Sundays, bank holidays, those days were taken. And many couples didn't want to wait another year or two to get married. They'd already postponed. They wanted to get married then and there. And so weekday weddings, which have already been happening, but they became a lot more popular. I love weekday weddings so much that I've actually done a whole episode about why I love weekday weddings, how you can make them work for guests who may have to take time off work, how you can consider, Friday afternoon traffic or Wednesday morning traffic, whatever it might be. I'll drop a link to that episode in the notes because I think weekday weddings are amazing. Weekday weddings are technically off-peak, which means you can actually save money. The chances of your dream suppliers and your dream wedding venue being available are so much higher on a Wednesday or a Thursday than, say, a Saturday. So if you want to get married and you can't seem to find anyone who's available on your dream wedding date, why not consider a midweek wedding? I think they're amazing. Next thing that I love about the pandemic wedding trends is people had more intentional time on the day. So this was largely because there was a period of time where you could only have a certain amount of guests at your wedding. And so the good thing about where we're at now is you're really only limited by the guest list count that your venue offers. So as long as your venue has enough seats and, plates for your guest list, you can have them there. So that is still something that we want to celebrate. We love big weddings. But when the weddings were smaller, when you could only have, say, 25 people at your wedding, there was a lot more scope to be intentional about the time that you spent with your guests and with each other as a couple. And so I think that's something we should hold on to. I've heard so many couples share their amazing wedding planning advice. And if you look at our real wedding features on our Weddings Online blog, so many couples say that the day flies by so quickly. And so what they recommend is finding a moment in the day where you can just be with your other half, and even if it's 5 minutes, and you can just be with each other and say, oh my gosh, we're married. We did it. We've planned this wedding. And if you can do it in such a way that you've got a view of all your guests, just look at your guests and just think to yourself, oh my gosh, we made this happen. We planned this, and look, we've got friends and family from all different places. They're all together celebrating our marriage. How amazing is this? So my advice is take some time to be very intentional on the day, to really soak it all in. It's something that we were doing more of during the pandemic, but it doesn't mean we can't do it now. And I also advise you to take as much time as you can to spend with your guests. So what I did on my wedding day was I actually had 9 bridesmaids. Not for everyone. I had 9 bridesmaids. My husband had 9 groomsmen. And so on the morning of our weddings, we actually got lots of great quality time with those friends of ours. I had my parents with me, my husband and his parents with him. And so you got lots of quality time with our closest friends and our parents. And then when we were on the dance floor, we actually made a point of being on the dance floor, dancing with our guests, having fun together. It wasn't like we were having deep conversations with people on our wedding day, but we were spending as much time with them as we reasonably could on the day. So find ways to do that. Try your best not to get too caught up in the formalities. Someone else will do that for you. Your wedding planner, your photographer will make sure that all the key shots are taken, but just enjoy being with people and being with each other. Something else that I really loved about the pandemic weddings was remote planning. Now, planning a wedding can take a lot of time. Now, before COVID, before lockdown, before we were kind of restricted to being in our homes, couples were required to have lots of in-person meetings and viewings with different suppliers. Now, some of those meetings are much more productive when you can have them in person. For example, if you're looking for a wedding band and you can go and watch the band perform live, it gives you a much better understanding of the type of music that they play, but also how they interact with the crowd. If you're looking for a wedding venue, it can be really helpful if you're able to walk through the venue and you can get a good idea of the flow from, walking into the main doors and where the bathrooms are and how tall the ceilings are and all of those kinds of things, maybe the natural light in the venue. But that's not to say that you can't do many of these things virtually. If you're planning a wedding abroad, it's totally possible to at least have some of your meetings virtually. You can have video calls. A lot of suppliers have 360-degree tour videos available, so you can get an idea of what venues look like. You can even have virtual suit fittings. Suppliers have become very creative so that they can help couples like you to plan their wedding without having to do everything in person. So you're getting the gift of time, and it means that you can plan things more efficiently so that the meetings that have to be in person, you can prioritize. But the other ones, if you can do them online, if you're meeting with your wedding planner over Zoom, great. There's not much that you can't achieve by doing that. Something else that I love, speaking of technology, is live streaming a wedding. Now, back in the day, if you lived far away and you couldn't go to someone's wedding, or if you became really sick for some reason and you just couldn't go, you basically just missed out on the wedding, and it just is what it is. But because of lockdown and the pandemic, live streaming became very popular, and particularly with weddings. There are many companies that now specialize in helping couples to live stream their wedding to friends and family all over the world. And if that's something that you're interested in doing, I highly recommend exploring your options. So there may still be people who just can't travel to your wedding for a number of very good reasons. But if you want to include them in the festivities anyway, live streaming is a really good way to do it. And there's lots of ways you can still make it interactive for those people, so they're not just kind of spectators. I've written lots of blog posts about it on the Weddings Online website, where you can get guests to feel like they're still part of the fun, even if they're watching from a distance. Another thing that I loved about the pandemic is the VIP guests. Now, granted, this is because we had a smaller head count, but something that I loved about it is that it kind of forced couples to invite only the people that they really, really had to have at their weddings. There was a period of time where it could literally just be 2 sets of parents and maybe one friend on either side. And I'm not hoping that we're going back in that direction. But it did highlight the fact that sometimes we're inviting people to our weddings because we feel like we have to, maybe distant relatives, or, this person who your dad is friends with that you've never met. So I guess my advice to you is consider who you really, really want at your wedding. Start with that list. And if you feel like you've got space in your budget, if your venue is big enough and you want to open things up a little bit to your parents to see if they've got friends they want to invite, by all means. But prioritize the people that you think, if they're not at my wedding, it's not going to feel the same. Those are your VIP guests, and you want to make sure that they are a priority when you make your guest list. The final thing that I loved is that couples were getting very creative with their entertainment. So now I am very happy, I'm over the moon that music and dancing is back. It's been back for some time now, and I love that. I love hearing about a couple's first dance. I love hearing about the dance floor being packed. That's good, and I think we should keep that. Dancing at a wedding is popular for a reason. I also love when I hear couples getting very creative with things like, a magician coming to entertain guests, or singing waiters, or, a fireworks display, or drummers. There's caricaturists and live artists. There's so many creative ways that guests can be entertained at a wedding. And I love that couples were thinking outside the box. I love that suppliers were pivoting their services to offer something unique and special for weddings. And so I guess what I'm saying is consider all your options. You can totally have a DJ. You can totally have a band. You can also have a caricaturist. You can also have a fireworks display. You can also have a fun interactive game or quiz that your guests enjoy together. There are lots of things that we can be inspired by from the pandemic, and I think it's helpful to look back and go, you know what? I'm so glad that I don't have to do things in a particular way, but I'm also glad that the pandemic has kind of opened our thinking a little bit. So I hope that that's inspired you. I hope it's got you thinking. I hope it's given you a few ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And I would love to hear what you are doing for your wedding. Is there anything I've listed today that you're thinking, you know what? I didn't think about that. I would love to do that at my wedding. If that's true, let me know. I love hearing from you. But thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.